very fortunate to be able to receive that. And you know, locally here at TEDxPeachtree, last year we were introduced by Wendell and Kevin Adams to another idea worth sharing. It's Waterbrick, and you heard a couple of those backstage and saw some of them brought on. And Kevin, can you join me up here, because we're going to get a bit of an update today. They shared with us about this social entrepreneurship that they were endeavoring upon, that they were able to provide water and food and other things in these stackable containers. As you can see, we had a lot of fun last year stacking and showing how you could actually make things from them. But Kevin, at the time that you guys were sharing this with us, your father and I, we didn't know that we were just a few weeks away from a terrible, terrible disaster in Haiti. And I understand that you have an update now about how Waterbrick has really been instrumental in providing some assistance there.
I do, thank you. We all heard about what happened because it was all over the news. And we know that the initial earthquake was a 7.0. What most people don't know, and what is shocking, is that there were 52 aftershocks. There were 4.5 or higher. And the U.S. Geological Survey that measures these things said this was the strongest earthquake to hit this nation since 1770. So very impactful. And the numbers differ based on where you check on the internet, but somewhere they believe around 150,000 people died that day. About 300,000 people were injured, and 3 million people needed emergency aid. Today, 1 million are still homeless. So as they fight Hurricane Thomas today, they're in tarps and tents that are tattered and torn, and they're getting rained on today, 10 months later. So in Wandy, as you asked, what did we see when we went there? And we saw streets upon streets of pictures like this, where entire buildings were just completely destroyed to rubble. And this is where they live. And this tent city is as far as you can see, right across from the presidential palace that also was partially destroyed.
So Kevin, for those of us who weren't here last year, why don't you tell us a little bit about how Waterbrick works, and then how can it assist someone who's living under these conditions?
Waterbrick is a container at the heart of it, like any container that you can find in a retail store, holds water and food. We didn't start off being a company creating a product to market. We started off as a humanitarian agency trying to get water to people in need. There's a surplus in a lot of parts of the world, and there's a deficit in other parts of the world. How do you get water from one place to another and be able to do so in a way that's easily distributable? That's where Waterbrick came in. So the cool thing is, though, what do you do after? So I go send hundreds of thousands of these into South Africa or Haiti, and then what? Do they become waste? Do those countries even know how to deal with that waste in Wandy? And that's where we were challenged with, how do you make these reusable? How do you make them repurposable for long periods of times that also meets other needs that the people there have? So if you fill these with dirt or pea gravel, they can become homes, just like building blocks. They're adult-sized building blocks, play toys, like you played with as a child. But they stack and they interlock, and they have the structural integrity to be able to be a home for protection. So that's how they can last. And when we were there in Haiti, and we saw not only their tents, as you saw back here, what you don't see, and this was clearly on the news, a lot of people saw these images, but what you don't see is this is how they're cooking. So to the top you see the pan, and that's where they're cooking their food in. And up close, what you might think is trash, those are their dishes. So the Dasani bottle and the Mazola oil bottle has now become their dishware, because all of the stuff they were used to seeing as dishware was lost in the earthquake. It's underneath all of that rubble. And this stuff they found out of the trash. And we wonder why cholera has become such an outbreak recently, where 400 people were killed and over 3,800 people were seriously sick.
I was going to ask you about that because there's the Dasani bottle there. I would assume that they're not getting fresh Dasani water, though, so there's got to be some danger as far as even being able to collect water for cooking and other purposes.
Right. And so they are collecting water. They have wells, so they're able to get water, but it's a matter of how do you collect it and bring it back to your family. And they're using containers like this. You can see the yellow bowl. It's extremely dirty. They're using pots and pans. They're using things they found out of the trash. There are some containers over there, but a lot of them that have been used for a lot of other things that you wouldn't really want to drink water out of. And so that is what they have to use. And so what we're challenging other companies to think about is how do you take a product that normally, we have a friend of ours that talks about cradle to cradle. His name is Bill McDonough, and he's been a TED speaker before. This would be cradle to cradle because you're not putting it into the trash. You're not taking a product, consuming the goods, and putting it in the trash. Instead, you are repurposing it and putting it right back in the circle for reuse. And so that's what we are trying to challenge others to do the same thing, because this becomes a collection problem for Haiti and a lot of these countries that are not equipped to deal with trash. So that's what we experienced there.
So you obviously you came in to provide assistance for the earthquake victims, but then of course you mentioned the cholera outbreak, now the hurricane conditions coming in. What's the continued kind of relationship between Waterbrick and certainly the people of Haiti?
We are continuing to distribute these in Haiti with donations from corporate donors like Dow Chemical has been a major contributor to helping in Haiti. We're raising money through other means, from our website, through nonprofit organizations, and we're distributing them with the local Haiti officials for the Red Cross and the Rotary Club and an organization that's been there for 20 years called Love a Child. And so they've been very instrumental in terms of helping us beat through the red tape, the government bureaucracy of getting products into Haiti, allowing us to get it in there more easily because they know the government officials, and that's how we're getting it in there, and of course paying for it with the donors like I mentioned. But this is ultimately beneficial because now they can collect water, they can do so in a clean fashion. They're not going to throw this away. They're going to reuse this for a long time. It doesn't create waste in their country that they don't know what to do with, and that's really what we're trying to do here with Waterbrick.
All right. And I think you were saying that even before the storm conditions that were coming in, though, that conditions weren't markedly improved from when you arrived until today, almost a year after the earthquake.
Yeah, in fact, there's a lot of reports that say that 90% or more of the rubble that we saw on the ground after the earthquake is still sitting there. It's all still there. So their lives in terms of housing and the conditions of what they see every day, what they smell every day, is not changed. They do have food, and water has the basics. Some of the basics have been resolved, although, obviously with a cholera outbreak, it's still not completely resolved for them in terms of infection and disease. But, it's largely not changed. 90% rubble, and their economy is, when we look at their economy, even before this earthquake, and I compare it to the U.S., and I would compare it in this way. Right now, we're going through the worst economic situation in 80 years, and we call it the Great Recession, and we have 10 to 11% unemployment. Before the earthquake, there were close to 80% of the people unemployed. 80% unemployed, living on $2 a day. So as we think about, and I challenge other nonprofits to think about that, when you go into these countries and you are trying to help, it should be more than just giving that initial handout. What they need is a lift up. What they need is a way to employ themselves and generate commerce and business. And some of the things that we're working in partnership with is how do you make Haiti the plastic recycling country for the Caribbean? That would create jobs. How do you, set up manufacturing there to create products for the rest of the Caribbean? How do you create jobs that lift them up out of what was 8 times worse than what we're going through now, even before the earthquake. And that's what we're trying to help with. We're trying to help in that dialogue beyond just the initial basic needs. But if we can't solve the basic needs, we're never going to get to the long-term solutions. So we're trying to balance that in what we do in helping.
All right. Well, Kevin, we thank you so much for bringing us that update. It's always nice to find out kind of what the outcome was. And I'm sure none of us could have expected that this is where this product would be moving at that time when we got together last December.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Kevin is going to continue online. There will be a web chat coming up with him in just a few moments for those of you who are logged on with us from points around the world.